one into the night, deep into right, way out of here. Swung on, hit it, crushed, and the Phillies are going to lead it. Harper, the swing of his life.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out.
The Phillies collapse in New York again. 10 straight losses at Citi Field, 24 losses in their last 30 games in New York. And the Phillies grow more uncompetitive with each trip to the Big Apple. How badly shaken is your confidence in the Phillies? From WHYY, it is hitting season. Hey there, podcast pals. I'm John Stolnis from The Good Fight. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at John Stolnis. Coming up. You know, we have to do a podcast after every series. It's what we are contractually obligated to do, and we have a moral responsibility to do this for you, the Philly fan and the Hittin' Season listener. And I know for a lot of you, you come to this space after a series like what we just witnessed in New York to commiserate, to have your opinions and your feelings validated by the hosts, such as we are. Now, why you want me to validate your opinion? I'm just some schmo who's been watching the Phillies since the Von Hayes days at the Vet in the late 1980s. You know, I don't know, but you do. You come here, and I love you for it. And so we're going to talk about this series. We're going to grouse about it, and we're going to try and take a longer lens and see what this series really means. Does it mean as much in reality as the emotions that we're feeling right now mean? Because this was not a playoff series. The season is far from over. This was just an uncompetitive, disheartening, angering, frustrating, disappointing, and I gotta say, maybe even a little bit of a foundation shaking series against the Mets. And here's what I mean by foundation shaking. As good as you may have felt about this team, especially the way they played against the Mariners last week and the way we've seen them play this season at different times, that has to be shaken. Your confidence in this team, if it was there, and I know for a lot of you, there's not a lot of confidence in this team because we've seen this Phillies team play their best baseball, and when they do, they are the best team in baseball, and then we see them play like this. We see the stars play like this. We see them going from all of them being red hot, and then in the blink of an eye, and it happens over and over and over again. It's like Lucy with the football with Phillies fans. She just keeps pulling it out from us. We run after it, we kick it, and we say to ourselves after a big series like the Mariners, hey, this team has everything it needs to win a World Series. Even without Zach Wheeler, they've got it all. And then they do this. Then they lay this egg in New York against the Mets again. And against the Mets, it's for whatever reason, a team that is so hateable and infuriating, just nails on the chalkboard team to watch play. And the way that they just took over this series, the confidence that the Phillies gave the Mets this week, it's all just so much for us to take. It's so much for you to take. And I get it. This could very well be a series that if you believed in this team, it's shaking your confidence in this team right down to the studs, right down to its very foundation, where you really have to ask yourself whether or not this team can do it. I mean, again, I said before the start of the Mets series, even without Zach Wheeler, every prognosticator, every expert, everyone outside of Philadelphia looks at this Phillies team and they say that's the second or third best team in baseball right there. Objectively speaking, this roster has enough talent on it to be considered the second or third best team in baseball. But the second and third best teams in baseball don't do what the Phillies did this week in New York. I mean, I can understand losing 2 out of 3 in New York. I can even understand getting swept, but the games being close and competitive. You're rallying, you're putting big innings together. You know, you just maybe one thing doesn't go your way, one mistake by the pitcher, and the Mets take advantage, but you're battling back and forth. That's not what this series was. This was not a competitive series. The Phillies were outscored 25-8 in this series by a team that I still believe is inferior to the Phillies. The Mets are an inferior team to the Phillies. But you can't argue what you saw in these 3 games. The Mets played great, and the Phillies turtled up. And you really can't help but think that it has something to do with the field. It has to, right? We're going to get into that more in just a second. But let me give you, I'm trying to figure out which game in this series was the worst, guys. Which game do you think which game was the worst for you? Because I'm having trouble deciding which game I think was the worst in this series. Was it Monday's lose from ahead 13-3 shellacking after ace Christopher Sanchez was staked to a 3-0 lead and then he melted down and the Mets went on to score 13 unanswered runs? That is a game we talked about in depth on the Roundtable episode 1003, which you can hear on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or go over to our WHYY YouTube channel. Or was it Tuesday's heart-wrenching 6-5 walk-off loss after blowing a 2-0 lead, and then coming back to tie it at 5-5 with that dramatic Harrison Bader 8th-inning home run? You thought for a minute, we're going to kill the demons. We're going to kill the demons. We've exorcised them. Oh my gosh, we're going to actually come back and win a game against the Mets. We're actually going to mount a comeback and win a comeback game at Citi Field. But oh no. An awful 9th inning. A 9th inning that I wrote about for The Good Fight on Wednesday that you can read over at thegoodfight.com. Done in by Edwin Diaz, and then the Mets 3, 4, 5, 6 hitters off of Joran Duran, the guy who was supposed to be unhittable, and they hit him around like a rag doll. Jesus Luzardo got kicked out of the game after he was already removed from the game in the 5th inning as he melted down. Awful umpiring in that game also didn't help the Phillies. Was that the worst game of the week, or was it Wednesday's spiritless, dead team walking 6-0 loss in which the Phillies simply didn't show up? They didn't show up. 1 hit in the first 6 innings against rookie Nolan McLean. And listen, I get it. He's a good-looking rookie. He was their number 1 pitching prospect. He pitched 8 shutout innings against the Phillies, but 8 shutout innings against a rookie pitcher? Why is it a rule that just because he's a rookie pitcher, just because you've never seen him before, that the Phillies are going to struggle with him, that we should accept the Phillies struggling with a pitcher they've never seen before? How many offenses wailed on Mick Abel before he was sent back down to AAA, having never seen him before? Why is that a thing for the Phillies, and so often the case not for any other teams? And by the way, the Mets brought up their top pitching prospect, and he's shoving in his first 3 starts. Meanwhile, Andrew Painter remains down in AAA, scuffling along, working on stuff. Just noting the contrast there. And I get they're different pitchers at different stages. And Andrew Painter with a Tommy John surgery. I'm not necessarily ripping Andrew Painter. I'm just noting the 2 differences between these teams. The Phillies had to trot out Taijuan Walker on there. So listen, Taijuan Walker, he did the best he could. He is what he is. He left too many balls out over the middle of the plate in this game that the Mets they went to town on him in the 4th inning, and there was just not a whole lot anybody could do about it. He did wriggle out of that inning, giving up only 3, kept him in the game thanks to a strikeout and a double play. They had 1st and 3rd with nobody out, and then he didn't allow anything else. So good there, good for him there. But you're pitching Taijuan Walker out there, and you've got young Andrew Painter down in AAA, but he hasn't pitched well enough down in AAA to warrant a call-up, and so you have to go with Taijuan Walker. Meanwhile, the Mets bring up this Nolan McLean kid who is electric. And he pitched very well against the Phillies, and because the Phillies have never seen him before, there was absolutely no chance that the $300 million hitters, that the MVP slugger, that the catcher who's having a renaissance second half, that all of the guys at the bottom of the lineup, Brandon Marsh, Bryson Stott, all these guys who have been doing a whole lot better lately, hitting the cover off the ball in August, all of a sudden, it looks like they're holding the wrong end of the bat because they've never seen him before. Give me a break. The Phils enter this series with a 7-game lead. That lead is now down to 4. Again, could be worse. A 4-game lead at the end of August in the division, I think you'd have taken that. if somebody had offered that to you at the beginning of the season. But as was noted in a couple of different locations, this 10-game losing streak at Citi Field that the Mets have over the Phillies, the Mets with a 10-game winning streak, the first time since 1984 and 85 that the Mets have won 10 in a row at home against the Phillies. That was at Shea Stadium, of course. Rob Thomson said the Phillies weren't pressing on Wednesday against the rookie McClain. Obviously, the Phillies knew that how important it would be to take this final game on Wednesday, just to stop the bleeding, to put a tourniquet on this thing, to build that division lead back up to 6 games. You know, you win one of the games in this series, just one, and it's still a 6-game series. You still have the Mets at arm's length, and you would have muted their momentum. They would have had some momentum gaining a game, but just one game, you would have muted the momentum. But now you've given them life. You have breathed life into the nostrils of the Mets. And now they believe again. Now they believe they're back. They believe they're going to bring back the spirit of 2024, the OMG Mets. That's what they're all thinking right now. The Phillies gave them that hope. That's what this week did. And the Mets are incredible at home. You know, we know that, but still to get outscored 25-8, to be outclassed by this team again at Citi Field after having gotten swept in Citi Field in the first series back in April. The Phillies come out and have a chance, and Rob Thomson says, well, I don't think they were pressing against the rookie McClain. Said it's a matter of them not seeing him before. That was Rob Thompson's excuse for the way this offense, filled with star veteran players who have been in this league for over a decade, can't handle a rookie pitcher. And a good rookie pitcher. I'm not trying to say this guy stinks, but don't use the excuse that you've never seen him before. That is so tired. I'm done with that silliness. So, after watching this series, after watching these 3 games, I have 5 big takeaways. And then at the end of this, I'm going to also, I asked you guys to give me 3 words on how you felt about this series. I'm going to read down some of them in just a couple of minutes. You guys sent me a bunch of them. I got a ton of them on my Twitter. Many of them I can't read, guys. Listen, if you use the bad words, I can't use the bad words ones. So just, this is a family podcast. But as of this recording, I got 78 responses to that. And that is, by the way, I am stealing a bit from the BGN Radio, Bleeding Green Nation podcast. They used to do this after Eagles games all the time, and I don't normally do this, but after a series like this, I just kind of want to get a sense from where the fan base is. I think I have a pretty good idea, but I wanted you to put it down into a series of 3-word responses. And so I will read some of those coming up here in just a minute. All right, 5 big takeaways from this series against the Mets. Number 1, the Phillies should still be and are still the heavy favorites to win this division. At the end of the day, a 4-game lead in the National League East, the Phillies still control their own destiny in a big, big way. The Mets have a difficult schedule. They struggle on the road. The Phillies are going to host them for 4 games at Citizens Bank Park coming up here in September. So despite everything, despite it all, being 4 games up with a month left to go in the season is still a very good spot to be in. I'll tell you right now, and this is something I remember Charlie Manuel saying this in the rain delay between the first part of Game 5 of the World Series and the second part. You remember, like, in between there, like the Rays, the Phillies took a 2-0 lead in Game 5 of the World Series in 2008, and then the Rays kind of scratched their way back into it, and the game obviously got suspended with the score tied 2-2. And during the course of the 2 days that the World Series was on hold until the rain stopped, the Rays players started talking about how, like, hey, maybe this is destiny. Maybe the rain is a way for us to, it's destiny's way of saying we're giving you another chance. This is your shot. And I remember, if you watched the 2008 World Series video, Charlie Manuel had said something absolutely brilliant. He said, "I wouldn't trade positions." Like, if you had asked him to switch spots with the Rays, not switching spots. the Phillies were in the driver's seat there, and they're still in the driver's seat now. If I were the Phillies and the Mets, I wouldn't trade positions. If you were the Mets, would you trade positions with the Phillies right now? Of course you would. Of course you would. The Phillies still have the advantage. And the Mets are not going to be able to play all their games at home. And the Mets are not going to be able to play the Phillies at home. Really, we will find out whether or not everything we saw this week, whether it's the Phillies struggling with the Mets themselves or whether it's the field. Because when they come to Philadelphia for a 4-game series, that'll be a really good indication of what's going on there with regard to all of these losses up in New York. But the Phillies, despite it all, are still the heavy favorites to win this division. They still have a great shot at getting a number 2 seed in the National League. They're now tied with the Dodgers for that number 2 seed. They were up by 2 games before the series began, so it's unfortunate. That's one of the other things that happened is the Phillies dropped into a tie for the number 2 seed with the Dodgers. But they are still in a great position. They're still in a great position, at least in terms of the standings. So file that away. Big takeaway number 2. Man, I really think the Mets hitters have something on this Philly staff. Jason Stark said as much on 97.5 The Fanatic on Wednesday, and I said something on X, I think it was on Tuesday, before Jason Stark said something. But when you watched the Mets at the plate, I have never seen a team more comfortable in the batter's box. I've never seen a team less fooled at the plate than the Mets were. They seemed to spit on every pitch out of the strike zone. And then every time a pitch was in the strike zone, they had it timed to precision. They were not fooled more than a half dozen times in the entire series. Like everyone up and down the lineup. I'm talking guys with a 230 average and a 280 on base. These guys are wailing on the ball, no matter who's in the game, whether it's Christopher Sanchez. Watching what they did to Duran in the 9th inning, they were on every single pitch. Now, Duran left some pitches over the middle of the plate, but the splinkers that were hit for singles, they were over the middle of the plate, but they were both down. And he's throwing 97, 98 mile an hour splinkers, and the Mets were on those pitches like they knew they were coming. They sat on every pitch Phillies pitchers were throwing in this series. I don't think it's just that they were all seeing the ball great. Now, I'm not saying they were cheating. I'm not saying the Mets were cheating. There's all kinds of different ways that you can have something on the Phillies pitching staff. A way that these guys are setting up. Something that you can see from hand placement on the balls. I don't know what it is. But you can't tell me that the Mets were not the most... This is a great Phillies pitching staff. And this Mets team, this offense was so comfortable. I've never seen a team more comfortable up and down the lineup. The entire roster for a full 3-game series, like what I saw from the Mets against the Phillies this week. Jason Stark said on 97.5 The Fanatic Wednesday, I don't think the Mets are just hot, or that the Phillies are just cold, or that there is a curse. I think the Mets have tells on every Phillies reliever and know what is coming. Bryce alluded to this the other night with Christopher Sanchez, and Bryce Harper did. We talked about that a little bit on episode 1003. I honestly think that he is not just throwing stuff out there. I think this is a real thing. Well, they better figure it out. If this is true, Caleb Cottom and the Phillies better figure this out, because the Mets went, this number tells me everything I need to know about whether or not this was just, hey, the Mets are hot, or the Mets have something on the Phillies. They were 21 for 37 with runners in scoring position in this series. First of all, to have 37 at-bats with runners in scoring position in a 3-game series is bananas, okay? It's off-the-wall crazy to have 37 at-bats with runners in scoring position in a 3-game series. And then to go 21 for 37, that's a .567 batting average with runners in scoring position. The Phillies were 3 for 19. Now, the Phillies offense is a totally separate thing, and we can get into that in just a second. But for the Mets to go 21 for 37 with a 567 batting average, and there were a couple of bloop hits here and there, but the Mets were smoking line drives everywhere. Rope, base hit to right. Rope, base hit to left center. Rope, base hit down the left field line. I mean, line drive after line drive after line drive. It was crazy how hard the Mets were hitting the Phillies in this series. I have never seen a team sit on as many pitches as the Mets did. It was, the Duran inning in the ninth. Duran is a guy who lives off of awkward swings, and there wasn't an awkward swing in the bunch. The Mets were doing a lot of first pitch swinging too, and the Phillies never adjusted to that. But the entire lineup, all of them were smashing line drives everywhere. I really do believe Mets hitters have something on the Philly staff. I 100% agree with Jason Stark. Takeaway number 3. We have seen the best and the worst of the Phillies here in these last 2 weeks. The Mets did to the Phillies what the Phillies did to the Mariners last week. And I guess I have to retract a little bit when I said I've never seen a team sit on pitches and have as much success offensively hitting line drives everywhere like what the Mets did with the Phillies. The Phillies did kind of do this to the Mariners, a good pitching staff a week and a half ago. And we didn't say that the Phillies had anything on the Mariners. They were but see, the Phillies were being patient. The Mariners pitchers were out of the strike zone a lot. The Phillies were patient, and then they did a good job getting ahead of the count and then doing damage on pitches in the strike zone. That's what good offenses are supposed to do. That wasn't really what was happening in this Phillies series for a lot of the time. Like, they were just first pitch hunting, the Mets were, and smashing things all over the place. But it was the exact same scenario. The entire lineup was mashing against a good staff, and the Phil's pitchers silenced a very good Mariners lineup. So the Phillies did this to the Mariners last week. So this is how it feels. And the Mariners have bounced back just fine since the series in Philadelphia. But we see that when the Phillies are on their game, there is no team better in baseball. We've seen that. We've seen that on multiple occasions. We saw that in Texas. We saw that against the Blue Jays. We've really seen it a lot in the Interleague series. We haven't really seen it a lot in the National League games, if you think about it. But the Phils lose it in the blink of an eye. When they're on their game, they're on their game, but you can't depend on it. Right? It's like if you're a salesman and you work on commission. Like, there are times maybe you don't know when you're going to get a big sale. But you get a big sale, and it can set you up for months. But you never know when that well is going to dry up. And you're not going to get any more of those commissions. And that's kind of what the Phillies offense is like. It's like a sales commission job. You know, you may hit it. You may have a really good week. You may have a really good series, but you can't rely on it. You can't put your hat on it. You can't build your home on that foundation because it is as slippery as sand. That's how stable this Phillies offense is. It is a sandcastle. And that's just the reality of this group. To be red hot for a good stretch and then for the spigot to just turn off. I mean, I can't even count the number of times we have said this exact thing on the podcast over and over. And then you watch a series like the Mariners and you start to get your hopes up. You say Bryson Stott lowered his hands. He's starting to hit better. Well, that didn't manifest itself in the series against the Mets. Kyle Schwarber has been destroying the ball all season. Now, all of a sudden, he can't hit left-handers. After just destroying left-handers for the better part of 2 years, all of a sudden now, over the last few weeks, can't hit him. Bryce Harper can't hit in the clutch right now. Just can't do it. I don't know why. Over anxious, poor mechanics. I don't know why. Just can't do it. Trea Turner, was there a hotter hitter in baseball than Trea Turner against Seattle and Washington? And then this week, he looked like he did in the playoffs last year. Chase. Swing. Gotta swing. They were acting on Wednesday like if they swung, that they could win the other 2 games that they'd already lost and win the game on Wednesday. And just, it's maddening and frustrating at the same time. All right, takeaway number 4. The big stars turtled up in the biggest moments. I wrote a story for The Good Fight on Wednesday that crystallized things. I talked about the ninth inning on Tuesday night when Jhoan Duran got beat around by the Mets. It was a microcosm of these two teams in this series. You had, in the top of the ninth inning, the Mets closer, Edwin Diaz, who is very, very good, facing the Phillies' 2-3-4 hitters, Schwarber, Harper, and Real Muto. Edwin Diaz threw Kyle Schwarber a couple of fastballs right down the middle, which Kyle Schwarber swung through for a strikeout. Bryce Harper comes to the plate, fouls the ball off, takes a strike. That was borderline, but I think it was a good pitch, good call. And then strikes out on a breaking pitch that was out over the middle of the plate. Swings right through it. And then JT Realmuto gets a first pitch fastball on the inner part of the plate. Really good pitch. He got jammed and hit a weak ground ball to second base. The Phillies 2-3-4 hitters go 1-2-3 as meekly as a mouse. And then in the bottom of the inning, Jhoan Duran comes on. Second pitch to Starling Marte, a splinker, 97 miles an hour, down, but over the middle, but down, smashed into center field. It was a grounder, but smashed 100 miles an hour off the bat for a single. And then you had Pete Alonso come in. Pete Alonso had a monster series against the Phillies. He was everywhere. Just a tremendous series for Pete Alonso. He gets a first pitch splinker from Duran and smokes it into left field. And then you get the bad luck. Duran decides, okay, no more with the splinker. They're on the splinker. Let me throw my 102-mile-an-hour fastball. And he's gone up, and he's got Brett Beatty, and he's fighting Brett Beatty for all he's worth. And Beatty, to his credit, is fighting him off. Duran falls behind 3-1, gets it to 3-2, fouls a couple pitches off, and then he throws a perfect fastball in the inner part of the plate. And Beatty, instead of hitting a weak ground ball to second or shortstop, instead muscles one in to shallow left field that doinks just inside the fair line, just in front of Brandon Marsh. No fault of the Phillies on defense there. Just, you couldn't have thrown the ball in a more opportune place there. Bases loaded, nobody out, and then the game's over. The game's over. You got to bring the infield in. It really doesn't matter where you position the fielders, because then you have Brandon Nimmo smoking a 102-mile-an-hour fastball over the middle of the plate, but it's 102 miles an hour, and that's what I mean. Like, they were all over it. They weren't late. They weren't tardy. He wasn't thinking splinker. He wasn't protecting against anything like that. He was on every pitch. They were all on all of Duran's pitches. And so the Mets' big guys took advantage of the Phillies closer, and they got the job done in the clutch. The Phillies' big stars did not come through in the clutch, and that's kind of been a running theme late in games for the Phillies this year. That's why you haven't seen a lot of late-inning comebacks. You really haven't seen any late-inning magic from the Phillies this year. It's been few and far between. Bryce Harper, after the game, talking about Wednesday's 6-0 loss to rookie Nolan McLean, said, "We shouldn't have come in here and had those types of games." Talking about the series as a whole. Yeah, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have. And Rob Thompson says it's one series. I know it's against the Mets, and admittedly so, we need to play better, but we will. We've got a good club, and that's not going to change. I did like, I'll get to this more in just a second, but I will say, big takeaway number 5. I've seen some of you be saying the opposite of this online. I can't agree with it. Citi Field is in the Phillies' heads. It is the building. Rob Thompson may say it's not the building, but it's pretty clear that the environment there makes the Phillies uncomfortable, in the same way that the bank makes some other teams uncomfortable. You can't talk about what a great home field advantage Citizens Bank Park is, what a great advantage that raucous crowd, all those fans are, how much of an advantage that is for the Phillies, how it gets inside the heads of the other teams, and then dismiss the notion that Citi Field is a great home field for the Mets and that it negatively affects the Phillies. If you're going to call Citizens Bank Park a great home field advantage, and you're going to say that the fan base gets inside the opposition's heads and makes them play worse, then you can't say that going to a certain ballpark gets into a certain team's head, gets into certain players' heads, and causes them to play with less confidence, with less emotion. I can't see how you can look at these 3 games, at what happened in New York, and not say that Citi Field has something to do with it. That environment has something to do with it. The memories of last year's NLDS, that it doesn't have something to do with it, that you don't walk in there without the confidence that maybe you would have felt if you were going to go play in Colorado, or you were going to even go play in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. There's a couple places where the Phillies really struggle. San Francisco is one of them. And now Citi Field is another one. There are some places where there's bad memories, where players don't see the ball really well. They don't feel right there. These are games played by human beings. It's not a video game. The Phillies fall apart in New York. They're lifeless there. They just are. It does have something to do with Citi Field. And I don't know that for this group that it's going to go away. So the only thing you can do is avoid playing playoff games at Citi Field as best you can. Now, in this series, I'm going to say something that's a little unpopular as something the Phillies should have done. I would have liked to have seen a little old school baseball here. Back in the 80s and 90s, if you were getting trounced like this, but not just losing, if you were watching a team like the Mets, as comfortable in the batter's box as they were, sitting on pitches the way that they were, I'm telling you, midway through the game on Tuesday or early in the game on Wednesday, you would have seen a brushback pitch. You would have seen a Phillies pitcher knock a Mets hitter down to just remind them, don't get too comfortable up there. That's the way the game used to be played. That's the way Bob Gibson used to do things. That's the way Roger Clemens used to do things. And I don't necessarily adhere to the Roger Clemens way of doing things necessarily, but there was an old school mentality that pitchers had. That's where they're essentially saying, that's my strike zone. Don't get too comfortable up there. Phillies pitchers allowed the Mets to get exceedingly comfortable at the plate. And I know that this just isn't done in baseball anymore. You don't have pitchers, brushback hitters, to move their feet a little bit, get them on their butts. Do you remember 1980, Game 4 of the World Series? Phillies lost that game. But Dickie Knowles comes in the middle of the game and knocks George Brett on his butt. It was the turning point of the series. And I know maybe as time has gone on, people want to poo-poo that a little bit, but the lore is what it is. It's canon, folks, in Phillies history. That brushback pitch to George Brett was the turning point of the 1980 World Series. Now, I don't want to see anybody get hurt. I don't want to see anybody necessarily thrown at. I'm not saying that a Phillies pitcher should have drilled Juan Soto in the back, but if it would have happened, I'd have understood. I'd have understood it. And I know that's not a popular thing to say in this day and age of baseball, in this day and age of the world we live in. But, man, at some point, don't you have to start something? Don't you have to kind of get the guys fired up? Don't you have to, just start mixing it up a little bit? Get some fire. Like, if you're going to lose the series anyway, show some fight. Show a little fight. The Phillies showed no fight on Wednesday. So that was something that I just kind of thought was missing a little bit. And it's something we absolutely would have seen 20 years ago. Maybe less time than that. Right? 2005, would we have seen that? Maybe. But it's a different generation of pitchers. These guys all know each other. They all play travel ball together as kids. They're not throwing brushback pitches at each other anymore. That's just not the way it's done. So really, honestly, the only thing the Phillies could do here is just avoid the Mets in the playoffs. If they avoid the Mets in the playoffs, I think they can make a run. But if the season ended today, do you know what one of the playoff series would be? The Mets would be the 6th seed. And by the way, the Mets now have a 4-game lead on the Reds for that final wildcard spot. Essentially, the 6 National League playoff teams are in place. They're all set. It's just going to be now a matter of positioning. Because I can't imagine the Reds or anybody else hunting down the Mets at this point. The Reds aren't good enough to do that. So you've got the Dodgers, you've got the Cubs, you've got the Brewers, you've got the Phillies, you've got the Mets, and you've got the Padres. So it's going to be those 6 teams. So it's just a matter of who's going to play each other. And right now, it would be the Phillies and the Mets in the wild card round. Phillies as the 3 seed, Mets as the 6 seed. Now, there would be no games at Citi Field because in the wild card round, all the games would be played in Philadelphia. So maybe you'd have a fighting chance at that point against the Mets. But the Phillies can't win there. They can't win in New York. They can't win in Citi Field. They just can't. I don't know why. But they just can't do it. So those are my 5 takeaways from this series in New York this week. A truly dreadful 3 games of baseball. Listen, if you're like me and you watched all 3 games, if you're one of those people, you're a diehard. I would not have at all blamed you if you sat out Wednesday, and you would have exhibited better mental health and better life decisions if you'd done that, because it truly was awful. But where do we go from here? That's the question Phillies fans are asking after losing 3 in a row to New York. And I think, again, reasons to be looking at this from a positive standpoint in terms of positioning for the rest of the season and winning the division. Scott Lauber noted this in his Gamer. If the Phillies go 14-15 the rest of the way, let's say the Phillies play 1 game under 500, the Mets would need to go 18-11 to catch them. And the Mets have not had a 29-game stretch that good since May and June. That's according to Scott Lauber. And something Harper said after the game, too, on Wednesday, I'm at least glad to hear that he's saying this. Whether they internalize it and do something about it, because after Monday's game, after Tuesday's game, we heard a lot of talk, heard a lot of things come out of the mouths of players, and then you see what happened on Wednesday. So you hear a lot of things, and then it doesn't exactly translate on the field. You can say what you want. You can say anything. It's got to be backed up with action. But Harper said he learned a lesson this week. It's about understanding that we have to have a sense of urgency as well. You know, we can't just say, hey, we're 4 games up and we've got a lead on them. Yeah, but will that actually translate into you getting a hit late in a game with a chance to win? Will those words that you just said, yes, having a sense of urgency as well, what does that mean? What does having a sense of urgency mean? What are we trying to say by that? Does that mean we're going to be playing more small ball? Does that mean we're going to actually be taking more pitches, drawing more walks? Or does it mean being more aggressive at the plate? Does it mean stealing more bags? What does playing with a sense of urgency mean? And why didn't you play with a sense? If you were going to play with a sense of urgency, why wouldn't that have happened in these 3 games in New York? Was there not a sense of urgency, even though you were 7 games up in these 3 games in New York? That's what I can't figure out. So again, we say a lot of things. We say a lot of things because we have to say things. But it's, I'm glad to hear him say it. I'm glad that they're at least cognizant of the fact that they can't put anything on cruise control, that they have to have a sense of urgency. I just want to know what that is. What is that sense of urgency? What does that mean? What is that going to mean on the field? What is that going to mean that you're going to do differently the rest of the way? Because the issue here is not even just necessarily these 3 games or a curse of Citi Field. It is, how do you stop yourselves from falling into funks and disappearing? And I'm not just talking about you, Bryce Harper. I'm talking to Trea Turner, who went 3 for 14 with 5 strikeouts in this series. I'm talking to Kyle Schwarber, who went 0 for 11. And it's hard to get on Kyle Schwarber because he's been so great. Every player's allowed to have a bad series, but this was a truly bad series at the worst time. JT Realmuto, 0 for 12 with 5 strikeouts. Runners in scoring position again. The Phillies 3 for 22 with runners in scoring position in this game. And the Mets made it look so easy. They made it look so easy. Really, it was Harrison Bader, somebody who came from the outside, that had to provide the big moment in the series when you thought maybe they were going to break through. It didn't come from Turner or Harper or Schwarber or Realmuto or Castellanos or Stott or Marsh. It came from Harrison Bader, who just got here. So what does the sense of urgency mean? What is that going to do? How is that going to manifest itself? How is it going to get you to not disappear in these moments when you really need to be there, when you really need to be present? How is it going to keep you consistent offensively? How is it going to keep you consistent offensively? How is that going to happen? How is the playing with a sense of urgency? What does that mean? So where do we go from here? I hope that Bryce Harper and the Phillies play with a sense of urgency moving forward. Maybe that just means being more focused on every pitch. Maybe that means being more intentional about going about your business pregame. or watching video post-game, or being open and receptive to coaching, or I don't know what it means. But the Phillies have no time to rest. They are going to host the 4th place Atlanta Braves for a 4-game series this weekend at Citizens Bank Park. Thankfully, they get a trip home. And they get to play a Braves team that has struggled this season, for sure. The Phillies usually play the Braves pretty well at Citizens Bank Park. I'm predicting a split in this 4-game series against Atlanta. Meanwhile, the Mets continue their homestand, and they play the Marlins for a 4-game series. That's not encouraging. The Marlins have played better this season than anyone expected, but they are no longer a red-hot team. They are a team that is struggling a little bit right now, and so you would expect the Phillies, you would expect the Mets to probably win that series, to take 3 out of 4 games there. The Phillies then go to Milwaukee for a 3-game series Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. Kind of weird there's an off day on Tuesday there, but a 3-game series with the team with the best record in baseball. The Mets, though, have a difficult task in front of them as well. They have to go into Detroit, maybe the second best team in baseball, for a 3-game series in Detroit against the Tigers. And then, really, this division is going to come down to the 4-game series in Philadelphia, September 8th through the 11th. This series made that so. The Phillies could have put this thing away, but they didn't. They've made it a game. They've made it a series. They've given the Mets hope. They've let them back in it. They've given them momentum. And we'll see what the Mets do with it. I'm not convinced the Mets are going to be able to take advantage of it the way they did last year, but now Mark Vientos is red hot. You got everybody in this lineup hitting now all of a sudden. They still have issues with pitching, but it looks like they're getting these young guys to come up. And what if Nolan McLean turns into like a savior down the stretch? I don't think I can take it. I don't think I could take it. I truly don't. And the Phillies actually knocked out the Mets starters early in the first 2 games of this series. That's what really kills you. So they knocked out Kodai Senga early in his game in the game on Monday with Christopher Sanchez in there, and you couldn't finish the job. And you knock out Sean Manaea in the 5th inning and couldn't get the job done. And then Nolan McLean comes in and wipes the Phillies out because they've never seen him before. Stop it. So that's where we go from here. This division will come down to a 4-game series in Philadelphia, September 8th through the 11th. We'll see where these 2 teams are at that point, but I think that's where this whole thing is gonna end. All right, I told you that we were gonna do 3 words. Give me your takeaways from this series in 3 words. Brandon Lee Gouton, my good buddy who runs our sister blog, Bleeding Green Nation. Phillies deserve boos. He is absolutely right. The Phillies deserve to be booed, maybe a little bit. I also think fans deserve boos after watching that series. You crack open a cold one, fans, because maybe more than just a cold one. Bob Vitrone Jr. He's a terrific numbers guy over at the Philadelphia Daily News. One of my favorite follows on the X at BoopStats. You probably follow him. It's a marathon are his 3 words, and so I like where Bob's head is at. I like that he is a measured soul here. It seems as though he is trying to explain to us that, yes, the Phillies are still in a great spot. You're going to have a bad series. You know, this 3-game series in New York may end up meaning absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. Phillies might win this division. They may miss the Mets entirely in the playoffs and go on a long postseason run. And that this Mets series, this series in Citi Field, will have absolutely nothing to do with anything here in the year of our Lord, 2025. So I like where Bob's head is at there. I'm not emotionally there right now, but mentally and intellectually, I know that Bob is right. Philip Herron, who used to be the editor of the Delaware County Daily Times, a paper of record, said, Mets better team. I disagree with Philip on that one. I don't believe the Mets are a better team than the Phillies. The Phillies are the better team. They just are. On paper, the Phillies have the better team. They are the better team. They've been playing better throughout the season. Unfortunately, in this series, yes, the Mets were the better team. Phillies curveball machine, one of my favorite follows on X. Play like losers. The Phillies certainly did play like losers. At Phillies Jake, now listen, at Phillies Jake, you didn't do 3 words here. You said, I think you need to complain about Max Kepler again. That'll fix everything. That I can get back to that for sure, Jake. But we couldn't read your post here because it was not 3 words. So I'm sorry to say that, Jake. But next time you wanna get something on the air, make sure that you follow the rules. Jim DiLorenzo at JHD16 tweets, lollygagging, lackluster, surrender. I think that's pretty good. Pam Hutchinson at Pam Hutchinson. The Walking Dead. They certainly did look like that on Wednesday. And now, see, Phil's fan 2412, you made the same mistake that Jake did. Who is the vocal leader on this team? Who steps up in the clubhouse and tells it how it is? I can't read your tweet on the show, Phil's fan 2412, because you didn't follow the rules. It's not 3 words. I'm sorry. That's just the way things are. But to answer your question, it sounds like Bryce Harper is at least stepping up here in the post game. And Kyle Schwarber is always a guy who does that. Those are your vocal leaders. Those are your guys. And they're saying the right things. They're just not doing the right things. And it's easier to say the right things than it is to do the right things. It's not a personality flaw either. That, I'm not trying to criticize them for saying the right things and not being able to do it. I get baseball's hard, but it's hard for the Mets too. It's hard for everybody in the majors. They're all playing the game at a different level than any of us could ever imagine playing, and they're all equals. So yes, it's all hard for them, but for the Mets it was less hard this week, and it should have been less hard for the Phillies than it was. Brendan at Brendan Freitas 13 says they don't care. I don't believe that. And that's one of the things that I kind of want to get away from is the Phillies don't care, that they don't have any heart. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they're executing. And I think they want to play hero. They get outside themselves. They don't trust their teammates even to do the job. I think everybody wants to be the hero and take it all on themselves and hit the 5-run home run. At dirty_Daniel48 says Phillies are cooked. Well, look, they could be. We'll see what the last month of the season says. I do not think they're cooked, but they were cooked in this series, that's for sure. At my Phillies hat says Kevin Long sucks. Kevin Long he's not popular in Philadelphia right now because of the reappearing Phillies offense. See, at Photo DW, you did it again. Same thing as the other guys. Don't win when you're scared. That's 5 words. That's too many words. We can't read it. We can't read it on the show. Sorry about that. At Ted Wins Official, Schwarber no show. Yeah, we just read the numbers a second ago. All right, there's a bunch of you who didn't follow the rules. I can't read them all. At Ready Eddie Bewell tweeted, find your identity. That's a good one. The Phillies don't really have an identity offensively. Their identity has been starting pitching. Starting pitching was not great. I think the starting pitchers were a little overly emotional in this series. Luzardo was a little over. Now, Luzardo came out throwing 99. He had 100 on the gun early in the game. But again, Mets hitters were just on him. Even though his stuff played up way better than it normally does, he struggled. He couldn't get through 5 innings. Just makes me wonder what is going on there. But find your identity. The identity is the starting rotation. And unfortunately, the starting rotation didn't get the job done in this series. Everybody's going to focus on the offense. Christopher Sanchez blew a lead. Jesus Luzardo blew a lead. Those are the 2 guys you needed to win, who needed to give you top of the rotation performances, and neither guy did in this series. At TV, Alansky says season is over. Again, I don't agree that it was season is over. At Twister A10 takes a different tact. Series didn't matter. I don't know that the series didn't matter. It certainly mattered in the standings. I think the Mets feel like it mattered. At Mark Breslauer adds, nothing has changed. I think that's very fair. Nothing has changed. Again, same kind of thing that we've seen from the Phillies in Citi Field and in big series where they just kind of, again, turtle up. At Assists Phillies tweets, no killer mentality. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. Pressure, no diamonds. That's at Hate My Sports Teams. Yes, we all do right now. At S. Floman B, Sam Flummenberg on Twitter, just rolled over is a good one. Eagles next week at John R. Strayer. Yes, Eagles play the Cowboys next week. That'll take some of the focus off of whatever it is the Phillies are doing right now. So some good ones here. They play tomorrow at Mike Butts with a good tweet there. Jim Miller tweets 4-game lead. Yep, for sure. Ray Maffo, heartless, gutless quitters. It was abhorrent. From VG on X. Philip Stanton says, they don't fight. Daryl at Pop 1964, gutless. Feeble in Queens from at Gamecock AP. So some good three words here. Huge opportunity wasted by at DMAX 713. Absolutely, 100% agree. Golden opportunity, huge opportunity wasted. So a lot of them are on here. I can't go through all of them. As of this recording, 84 Phillies 3 words. You can continue to add to it on my X. Just go to at John Stolnis on X and respond to hashtag Phillies 3 words to me. I won't be able to read them on this episode of the podcast, but let me know what you think. I would be curious to hear what your takeaways are in 3 words of this Phillies series. All right, everybody, look. Better days, I believe, are ahead. The Phillies have to flush this series in Flushing, and we have to flush it as well. The Phillies get 4 games against the Braves, another hated rival who is struggling. The Phillies have to take advantage before what should be a killer 3-game series in Milwaukee against the Brewers. So, big weekend for the Phils in Philadelphia. I know that even if the Phillies have a good weekend against the Braves, that you don't really believe in this team. The only way we're going to believe in this team is in October if they make a playoff run. That's the only way we're going to believe. And there may even be those of you out there who will never, ever believe in this team again unless they win the World Series. And I got to say, it's kind of fair. But that'll do it for this edition of Hittin' Season. I think we've done enough damage here on this episode of the podcast. You can find this podcast on the favorite podcast apps that you and your family members have. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you get your podcasts. That is where we are. We'll also have this podcast up on our Hittin' Season YouTube page. Subscribe to the Hittin' Season YouTube page, and you'll be able to watch this video or listen to this podcast on YouTube. And also make sure to subscribe to the WHYY YouTube page where you can watch the roundtable episodes there as well. Justin and Liz will be at you with their thoughts on this series coming up on Friday. And to preview the series against the Braves, they'll talk about the first game of the series as well. So they got you covered here at the end of the week. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Despite it all, thanks for being here and talking with me, listening to me about this series. Hopefully I helped. Until next time, this is Hittin' Season.